Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another special guest episode. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Karen Leitner. Karen is a med-peds trained physician and a coach for women physicians, and she was actually my first coach and my first introduction to all of the helpful tools that we talk about here, including the thought model, thinking about our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so I'm so excited to welcome her onto the podcast today. Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It is such a treat. And especially to help continue to spread these tools, to see you do that have been so helpful for me and for you and so many other women doctors. So I'm overjoyed to be here with you.
Yeah. And share with the audience a little bit about your story, sort of, how you came to this work. And and then we'll talk more about why we brought you on here today.
Sure. So I did primary care med peds, and I always like to talk about just the fact that I had a really hard time in residency with anxiety and just struggling with a lot of imposter feelings, things like that. And then I worked in practice for a number of years and I loved it. And I also had a bunch of kids during that time and went through a pretty profound burnout period. And then I sort of righted myself and did a bunch of non-clinical things and some urgent care and had another career. And then the pandemic hit and I found myself again feeling like not in the best work situation. And so I had listened to a podcast on coaching where I first learned some of these ideas, but that was the first time I actually invested in coaching for myself. I did a group coaching program that you've also done, EWP Sunny Smith, that was really, really transformative for me. And it was during that time I decided to certify myself because I really wanted to go even deeper with these tools. And then as it happened, I had an opportunity to use some of them to help the women physicians in my state. I'm in Massachusetts. I guess I forgot to tell you that. I'm in Massachusetts. I'm married. I have 3 daughters. I have a dog named Oscar. I have a house on Cape Cod, which is where I'm talking to you from right now. And so I just sort of jumped in and said, I can coach people who need coaching. And that's how my business started. And that's what I've continued to do to this day is work with women just like you and try to help. There's a lot of reasons why we don't always feel the best in our lives. There's a lot we can do to help ourselves. So, and I think, you started this podcast and I wrote an article recently in Kevin MD and we thought it might be a nice opportunity to talk with your audience about it because I'm sure a lot of people experience these sorts of challenges and maybe haven't thought about it in this way before.
Yeah, perfect. And that's such a great lead in. So we're going to talk today specifically about a recent article that you had published on Kevin MD. For those people who don't know, the platform Kevin MD is a website, it's a blog, it's a podcast. Created by a physician, Kevin Pha, started in 2004. And he really created it as a place where physicians and residents and students can come and they can share their stories and their experiences with each other. So it's a really wonderful place for us to go and learn really a huge variety of different sort of topics, not really so much focused on the medicine pieces, but really more about our lives within medicine and how healthcare happens and those things. And you wrote an article, like I said, recently published called When a Loved One is a Patient, Navigating the Emotional Burden for Physicians. And I'm curious how this topic came to you and like why you decided to write about it.
Yeah. Well, I think personally, I experienced a lot of, I guess I would call it internal chatter that I didn't really fully pay attention to. But when I would go to the doctor, when one of my kids was sick, we can talk about what that sounds like, but there's a lot of competing sort of parts of your brain. There's doctor you, there's patient you, there's parent you, then there's like worrying about how the medical establishment is judging you. And then there's frustration with how you're limited. And so all those things were in my mind when a loved one would be ill. But I think most recently, the reason I never thought I didn't realize that everyone experienced something like that. And then in my coaching work, I spoke to several women who were going through this similar sort of thing, where whether it was guilt that they hadn't been able to help a loved one in the way they wanted to, or if it was like apprehension about something they needed to do, but not being sure how to navigate as a parent and as a physician. And then my husband was ill. He had pneumonia a couple of months ago, and it all came up again because I was like, I think he has pneumonia. Do I treat him? Do I not treat him? Well, I actually let my license go inactive. I can't treat him anymore. I'm going to send him to urgent care. But then what if they don't what if they think I'm wackadoo?
What if they don't treat him?
I want to say, listen, he's had lingular pneumonia in the past. Make sure you listen to his lingula. He has all the symptoms, and this is right. And like, you're writing those things, you want to relay this information, and you're like, they're going to think I'm a total whack job, right? Or I'm demanding. So I just, the more you do coaching, the more you start to notice not only the thoughts you have, but the thoughts you have about the thoughts you're having. And I realized there is so much there that I just thought, here's an opportunity for me to have compassion with myself, because it's hard enough if it's your partner, and then you're trying to like silence this like part of your brain that's so worried about doing the wrong thing or being seen in whatever way we're worried about. So I wrote it in part for myself, but also to say, hey, listen, I know you physicians are also going through this a lot. This is a common experience we all have that no one really talks to us about, that we get to have compassion for ourselves, because in some ways it might be nice to just be, I call it a civilian patient who's just sitting in the doctor's office with their child saying, what's wrong? What do I do? Okay, thanks, goodbye. Right. And there's other drama that we have. There's the whole other side of things as a patient when you're scared and all these things. So I've spent a lot of time in my work in patient advocacy thinking about what are patients thinking when they're with a physician to try to help them. But I never really thought about, okay, what are physician patients thinking, and how can we sort of acknowledge that, normalize it, and how can I help them realize that, yeah, it's like trying to go to the doctor when you're also juggling like 6 oranges, right? That's like for us, because we're like,
right. And that tension of like, am I a part of the healthcare team as this family member who's trying to make sure that my mom says the right words that, will kind of trigger, kind of the concern in this direction, or do I take over that conversation? Yeah, I think mind chatter is probably the exact right term for it, right? Because we don't know exactly, how do I navigate that?
Yeah. And then I sort of uniquely painful because we cannot succeed. We cannot be an person taking care of them because of the mind chatter. And then usually also because of physical limitations on how, we can't see the record. We don't have the chart. We can't prescribe for them. So it's like we went into this profession. I think for me, at least, my number one reason was I want to be able to take care of people I love in the most stressful situations. And on a daily basis now, I have to realize, I'm sure I help, but I can't even use these skills to help them in the way I would with a patient. And that is very, sad. It's something you kind of have to grieve, because we didn't understand that. And there might be people who are able to do it better than I can, but I know that I'm not alone in feeling this way. I wonder, like, if you've ever experienced that, where then the person, gets bad care or gets unnecessary care. And then you're like, oh my God, I failed them somehow. It's like this extra pressure.
Yeah. And I think also we also run into the situation where we've got someone that we love who, is an adult, who is making their own decisions, who may or may not share our concerns, may or may not, listen to us. You share a story in the article about your mom being dizzy, and I think she went up on a ladder. Is that?
Oh, no, thank God, no. But she just like passed out in the lobby.
Just passed out. Okay, that's right.
And I had seen it coming, and I was like, here's some saltines, you're dehydrated, here's all the fluids, take some Tylenol. She didn't do those things. And then that happened. And then my response tends to be, I get angry. I was also sort of wondering, like, why am I so angry when medical things come up with my family? And I realized for a lot of us, this is like a very generalized coaching idea, but sometimes underneath the anger is a more vulnerable feeling, is like this like powerlessness, right?
I can't control
Yeah, I
either
wish,
what they do or what's happening with their bodies or any of it.
yeah. And so to me, I don't know if you've talked a lot with your listeners about self-compassion, but part of it is sort of acknowledging that powerlessness and then being kind to ourselves about it. Like, yeah, this is really hard for us. No wonder, right? No wonder we have so many feelings, and sometimes it gets problematic in terms of because my mom is like, well, I don't want to tell you whenever I'm not feeling well, because then you just get mad at me. I'm like, ah. Oh, another classic.
You're not helping, mom.
One time my mom, I'm sure all the physicians listening will appreciate this. She like had aphasia. She was watching TV and she couldn't really understand what the TV was saying. And she tried to write down a word and she was like, oh, I don't know what that word means anymore. So she just decided to go to sleep for the night and see how she felt in the morning. And there it goes again. I'm just like, Mom. And it was kind of weird migraine variant, but it was like,
yeah,
what do you do with that?
Yeah, but we easily assume that everybody knows what we know, as part of that phenomenon that we kind of discount, our own brains, our own training, our own experience and expertise. And part of that is assuming that everyone else knows what we know, right? And so, of course, your mom is just like, that's a strange thing that I can't think of this word. I'm probably just tired, I've had a long day. Obviously I'm going to go to sleep. And meanwhile, yeah, of course we freak out. We're like, no, you could be having a stroke right now. You could be having this or this or this or this, right? She doesn't have that differential.
Yeah.
Just thought she was tired, maybe.
Right. And then we get labeled as like the person who freaks out. So
right.
it's not.
Of course she does not want to talk to you.
Yeah. So, like this common humanity piece of self-compassion, which means like as humans, we all experience suffering sometimes. And this is like kind of suffering a lot of physicians experience it. That always makes me feel so much better. Okay. It's not just me. All across the world, there's doctors trying to help their loved ones. And it's hard. And we're all imperfect at it. And it's okay. It's not just me.
Yeah.
It's not just you.
Yeah. I love that common humanity piece, which is one of Kristen Neff's tenets of self-compassion. I'm wondering for you, like what else goes into that self-compassion work, that practice that you would tap into during these moments when you're feeling anger, you're feeling frustrated or guilty or whatever the emotions are.
I'm glad you said it that way, because the only way I've ever really learned about self-compassion is Kristen Neff's work. So the three pieces are the self-kindness, the common humanity, and the mindfulness. And so for me, the mindfulness part is to even be like, to notice I'm getting angry. Oh, I'm getting angry right now. That's what's happening. Okay, I'm feeling anger because I'm thinking this shouldn't have happened to my mom. Okay, well, that's interesting that I'm thinking that. It just puts you into that watcher state of what's going on for you. So you can kind of have perspective to like be rational instead of being, sucked into like, oh my God, I'm here, the mind drama, like the mindfulness piece and naming the emotion and just sitting with it and having some perspective on it. I feel more empowered in that place, and which doesn't mean I do it all the time for sure, but it's like I start to get worked up and then I'm like, oh, this is what's happening. Okay. Yep, this happens to me sometime, and it's okay that I'm feeling this way. And then I can be kind to myself about it and not, what we love to do when we have those uncomfortable feelings is like ruminate about them for like a really long time, right? And we do it with a lot of negative feelings, like especially when we're worried about someone. We lie awake and we're like, oh my God, and then they're not going to get the care they need. And then what if this happens? And what if that happens? And a lot of the times that we are in that rumination spiral, it's because there's a feeling we're having and we're trying to solve for the feeling with our brain, which you can't do. You can't solve for it. So we spiral out. So when we start to just say like, okay, I'm feeling worried because I really don't like not having the ability to, control my mom's healthcare. I'm feeling that. That's how I feel right now. I'm just going to be here with myself while I feel that way. And it lessens the spiral.
Yeah, we're kind of allowing that discomfort. We're noticing it. We might be naming it, right? And and letting it be there as opposed to pretending that it's not there, right? Numbing it away with food or alcohol or, Netflix, all the things that we would turn to. And I think overworking, right, becomes a big one for doctors.
Wow.
Yeah. So like spending some time just, okay, yeah, this is hard right now.
Yeah. Instead of
Okay.
resisting it is like, this shouldn't be happening. Told her not to do it. Why does this always happen? This should like, we can't control all these things. So sometimes we're like, we just allow it. We're like, all right, this isn't what I would choose for them, but this is just happening. Accepting that this is happening instead of believing that something else should be happening. And it doesn't mean, I'm sure there's also been so many times for you when your medical knowledge is so useful to someone else, right? So we don't just have to stand idly by and let people get terrible care. But this is during the times when you wish it was different so much, but you're really not able to make that happen for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I remember, kind of early on in the pandemic, when my mom experienced a health event and we sort of realized that made her high risk when she wasn't before, and that meant that we had to be distancing from her when we weren't doing that before. She was kind of part of our bubble. And, wanting so much for it not to be true, right? To pretend that it didn't happen, but also having to say, what, unfortunately it did. And, of course, my husband and I were out having to go to work as essential workers, right? And kind of being exposed and all of these things. And yeah, I remember I really hated making that decision, and being like, the doctor part of my brain knows that this is the right step right now. Yeah, I think that so many instances of that, right, where we kind of wish we didn't have the knowledge, maybe even because of what it means and how we have to think about problems.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle to look at this, because I do think the pandemic really heightened that sort of we have doctor brains, we know all this stuff, we have a keen understanding of what could happen and how sick people could get. And so we're really rigid about, for most of us, I know we're being really generalizing, but I'm going to enforce the distancing because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
A lot of other people did not understand it or did not want to understand it or did not see it the same way. And even within families, you have that conflict then. It's and that is another piece of what can be so isolating for us, is to sort of feel like, oh, they can't understand what this is like for me. They've never seen someone intubated, right? Like pronated or, we just have. So on the one hand, we just get to be extra kind with ourselves around that too. Oh, this is extra hard for me. Because what we end up tending to do is we just get on a soapbox and we get so mad about it. But then feeling that we're feeling that too. And it feels terrible. At least if things are going to happen, we can be like, yeah, this is hard. This is really hard for physicians, not just me.
I'm curious your thoughts on, I talked to a number of physicians who are caring for aging parents, right? And they're in that role as the daughter, as the son, as the adult child, but they've got this extra level to it with, they're also a physician, even though they may not be a physician who knows anything about any of the problem. They may be a pediatrician and they've got these aging parents or, something of that nature. And so many of these women that I encounter, they're really struggling with those parts, and they always feel like I should be doing better with my parents, but I've got these work responsibilities. And I'm wondering kind of your thoughts on that element of it, when it's not just kind of an acute, like my husband has pneumonia sort of picture, but it's more that long-term sort of management.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many pieces to that. I mean, for so many of us women, we have this thought, right? This belief or this little silent voice that just says I'm not enough. It's not enough. I'm not doing enough. And so I think it can be helpful sometimes. No matter what we do, we can't prevent our parents from getting older. We can't prevent aging. We can't prevent sickness. We can't prevent death. And so if that's what we think, we tend to take so much responsibility for everything, because you kind of have to as a physician, because you are responsible. But there's limits to what we can do also. And so I think sometimes what I talk to clients about is like, they'll think like, well, if I can't do this thing, I'm not a good daughter. So it gets very sort of sticky. The way I guess I would take this away from aging parents, and I would think about it as far as charts, right? Sometimes like, I didn't finish all my charts. I'm not a good doctor. And then we can be like, well, what actually do you think makes someone a good doctor? And we list the 10 qualities, and like charts don't show up there. So when we can't, when we have plans to go on vacation and our mother has a caretaker and has other children to be there with her, and our brain is like, if I go on vacation, I'm a bad daughter. We get to be like, wait, what does a good daughter do? Right? What are the 10 things that a good daughter does? I show compassion and love to my mom. I try to be available. I make sure to delegate to qualified people, because our brain makes it seem like we've just like abandoned our mother in the gutter, medical problems. In actuality, we've probably lined up like 75 qualified people and meals and phone numbers of doctors. So it's just sort of checking in with your brain to be like, wait a second, what are the facts? What are my expectations of myself? And can I give myself some grace that, okay, maybe I'm not doing it all the time, but I'm making sure that it's happening. And that is what a good daughter does. Like, we can't all quit our jobs and be there 24/7. And maybe our mom doesn't even want that, or our parent, or whoever. It's like,
I think that's really helpful to kind of step back from the situation and like, yeah, if I'm going to label myself as not a good daughter, like, let me think about what I'm actually thinking goes on that list, right? And I get to decide too. Like, I might throw on the list, I'm going to start putting on there that, I take care of myself in order to take care of my mom, right?
Yeah.
So that I'm not resentful and exhausted and all of the things that if I felt like I had to be there all the time, go into that. Yeah, I think that's really helpful.
Because it's also so black and white. We love the black and white thinking, right? I'm either a good daughter or I'm a bad daughter. And then we get to be, how does missing one birthday suddenly make you a bad daughter? Like, what if like our brains are just, there's so much gray. Some of the ways we show up are exactly the way we want to, as the best versions of us. And then sometimes we're called to do other things, but like our good daughter status is not so, we can just decide, I am a good daughter, period.
I'm a good daughter. Yeah.
I am. I can just choose to think that about myself, because the default is I'm always thinking I'm not. And then I'm finding evidence for that everywhere. And then we just feel horrible. And the craziest part is like, when we're being so hard on ourselves, or when we're coming from scarcity, we're not really showing up for the person in the way we want to. We're not connecting. We're not feeling love. We tend to be more short fused or irritated, or we hide or we avoid. So when you actually look at the relationship, like, the best relationship is always going to be one where you allow yourself to feel love for them, and whether or not you're always there becomes, or, there's things we can't control, and just sort of normalizing that for each of us too.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful way to think about it, and a great place for people to get started, when they kind of find themselves in that stew.
It's hard. It's really hard. I wish I could be like, oh, it's fine. It's really, really hard. And it's painful to go through that with a parent. And it's also just something we're all going to have to go through.
Yeah. And I think, as you alluded to, it's also not a one and done, right? It's a continual process of reminding yourself that, we will experience this again. We will experience disappointment and frustration and all of these emotions. And the goal is not to solve them and fix them and they go away magically, right? The goal is to be able to step back and be that watcher, that person who says, oh, I am feeling emotion X right now. What's going on? Why am I feeling this way? And then we get some insight about, okay, well, this makes sense. I'm having these thoughts.
Yeah. Because I think so much of the time we're like, oh, I don't want to feel that bad feeling. I guess something's horribly wrong, that I'm feeling sad that my parents are aging. No, actually, that's a normal response.
It's a normal thing.
Yeah. We can just feel that way. Yeah. Lots of us feel that way because we're human.
Yeah. And as Byron Katie says, like, who am I without that thought, right? If I didn't have to have that thought over and over again about the good daughter, bad daughter sort of thing, how much easier might life be for me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the same thing with being a doctor. If I'm just like, I'm a good doctor, I'm a good enough doctor. I don't have to prove it every single day with if I'm late or not late, or how many charts I do or don't do, or did I know the diagnosis off the top of my head, or we just get to we get to separate those things. We don't always have to be so judgmental of ourselves,
Yeah.
but we are.
Oh, we are.
We
We
are.
are. We can unlearn it, right? We learned it, we can unlearn it, right?
Yeah.
We didn't come out of the womb this judgmental of ourselves, right? We had lots of opportunities to practice that, and we can keep practicing undoing that. Yeah. Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about kind of the nitty gritty of the article itself. So this isn't the first article that you've had posted on Kevin MD, but I talked to a lot of people who are really hesitant to put their ideas out there. They might feel fine in the exam room. They might feel fine, speaking one-on-one with colleagues, but when it comes to putting their thoughts out there more broadly, they're like, oh no, I don't do that, right? I can't believe that you would publish an article, or you have a podcast, or like any of these other things that we want to be like, oh, that's something not for me. And I'm wondering kind of what it felt like for you when you first put an article out there and sort of dipped your toe into that water. What was that like for you?
Oh, this is so fun to get to talk about with you. I mean, so we talk in coaching a lot about how failure is something you want to experience. And most of us are so loath to experience. We're like, I will avoid failure. Like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to avoid it. It's the last thing I want to feel. And what I will say about this is the second article I wrote for Kevin MD. And the first article I wrote, we can label a failure but I wasn't prepared for that at all. I was like, oh my God, thought work is amazing. And I have these tools. I'm going to regale the world with them. Let me write this article. And the article I wrote was about how to use thought work so that if you're on call and it's feeling terrible for you, these thoughts might help you. Here's some other ways you could think to try on and see if any of them feel better. Because for me, when I was on call or even anticipating call back in the day, especially in residency, the thoughts would be like, I hate it. I'm terrified. Something terrible could happen. And I'm not cut out for this. And I'm going to have a panic attack and someone's going to die and it's going to be my fault. Right. And then I would go into, I think about it like you're in the Olympics, you're about to go play on the Olympic field and your pep talk to yourself is like, I'm going to kill someone. I'm going to die. I'm going to lose. The whole world is going to laugh at me. It's just like, there's such a dissonance there. Why not try to think things? If you have to do call, think thoughts that are going to help you feel ways that are going to enable you to do it better. So that was the point of it. And why am I calling it a failure? So I put it out there. And I don't know if I named the article or if Kevin MD named the article, but the article was titled, Don't Dread Call. So I got a huge backlash, so many negative comments. Who does she think she is? Clearly, she doesn't take call. The system is broken. They're taking advantage of us. She's an idiot. Just like the meanest things people could ever say. And I was unprepared and shocked and horrified. Right. And then I also got people who are like, thank you so much. This really helped me. I really had such a benefit from this article you wrote. I shared it with this person. I shared it with this person. And it really, I never thought of it that way. So they were there, right? Of course, your brain ignores the positive half and just wallows. I was like, there's a whole universe of doctors who think I'm an idiot and who think I'm horrible. And I went into my shame place for a while. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm willing to experience that if I'm helping people and if I'm speaking up, because that's just what you're opening yourself up to. So once I recovered enough with this article, I was like, I already experienced the worst. Like I already had the biggest failure. I had really mean said about me on the internet. And I love, Brene Brown, and you're the man in the arena, the woman in the arena. I'm going to show up and I'm just going to either not look at the comments, which of course I look. So that didn't work. We can talk about that boundary. About this one, or I can just be like, it. How much worse could it get? Like I've already experienced that, so I guess I feel a little bit untouchable. I'm just going to put it out there because now the worst has happened and the failures happened and I didn't die and actually nothing happened. And so here I am. I want to share this. I think it might help people. So that's my take on it. Is sometimes like doing something hard or being afraid of what someone else might think. And of course, you don't want to get up there and say such incendiary or politicized, or, if your institution you have to protect that. But if you have something important to say, I think you just say it and tell yourself, you have to be courageous, and then just tell yourself, I'm okay. I will be able to handle whatever the response is. Because basically they're just typing words on a screen.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that part of the story. But it just, what jumped out is, kind of like, well, there's a good example of black and white, right? It was either like, you're the worst person in the world for saying these things, or that was so helpful, and now call is so much easier for me because I've changed my perspective. It's such a good example of how, we're not all each other's flavors. I see you post on that often of yeah, some people like mint chocolate chip, other people like maple pecan. No one's wrong, but if I like mint chocolate chip, that's what I'm going to pick. I'm not going to pick maple pecan, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
If I'm somebody's maple pecan, no big deal. My words are not for them. The thoughts I'm sharing are not for them. It's totally fine. They don't have to listen.
Yeah, I really can't control if people like me or not, or like what I have to say or not. And I don't really have to worry about it. That's their business. I get to control, do I like me? Do I like what I have to say? And is it what's my compelling why? Right?
Yeah.
If I really want to help people, it's a lot easier to do it when I'm using some kind of platform than if I'm just speaking it into my shoe or talking to my dog. So yeah, but it's for sure a learning process. I mean, sometimes it just happened. I was trying to coach someone on agenda setting with patients, and because I know this is very off topic, but this is still something I think might blow some people's minds, which is just this idea that our patients don't actually know how long the appointments are.
They often don't, which is crazy. Really? How do you not know?
How would they know? We're this is when your appointment starts. It would be so great if the system would say your appointment starts at 9:15 and ends at 9:30. Then we've already set them up to have this expectation of how long it's going to be. But what I like to say is we basically have, the 8 items or less aisle in the supermarket versus the unlimited aisle. And everyone gets booked in the same aisle. If they have one issue, if they have 50 issues, they get the same. It's such a bad, it has to get better. But anyway, so I was talking to them about that, and they said to me, what was it like for you when you talked to your patients in that way, when you told them we have 15 minutes? And I was like, oh, I never did that. I never tried. This is all just things that I've come to after the fact.
Learned, yeah.
It might be good for me to go back into practice so I can practice what I preach. But I think I can't even remember why I just brought that up, other than to say sometimes, why did I bring that up? It seemed relevant, and now I've lost the thread.
I was thinking about kind of the black and white thinking, and that you could get this negative feedback from people, and the consequences, are not as dire as we think. Just thinking of that circumstance, say you had a patient encounter, right? And the patient didn't like you. They didn't like the encounter, right? If that's the case, well, that's okay. Even if they leave upset, even if they left a complaint, even if they had left a bad review for you, much of the time, nothing actually really happens from that. Okay, sometimes, manager might come to you. We don't like seeing these negative reviews on us, but are we actually unsafe? Hardly ever.
Oh, that's right on. It's sort of this idea that, did you know not everyone has to like you? Did you know that? Because we are socialized as women, and we're people pleasers, and we get a lot of reinforcement by being liked and being told we do a good job. And so we think if there's a patient who's mad, oh my gosh.
And I don't meet 110% of their expectations, which are not under our control.
They're going to be mad. What if that's okay? And the missing link is, what am I going to make it mean if they're mad? Because what we tend to do is oh, I'm bad. Oh, I did something wrong. Oh, I'm not good. That's optional. I don't have to choose to think that. I can be sometimes patients get mad because they want an hour with me, and I get it. I wish I could give them an hour. I can't. They can be mad, and I can feel totally good about the amount of time I have because it's not in my control.
Yeah.
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 See, we brought it all back together. We're good.
It's back.
Oh, great. Well, for anyone who, has been listening to us and has really, enjoyed hearing these thoughts that you've shared and wants to learn more about your work, tell my listeners where they can find out more about you and the work that you do.
Sure. So my website is www.karenleitnermd.com. It's Leitner. And I think you're going to be putting those links in the show notes. Thank you so much. I run my group programs about 3 times a year, and I have one coming up. It's called How to Feel Better for Women Physicians, and I offer CME, and it starts in April. So I would love for anyone interested to come do some work and help and feel better in their life for women doctors.
Great. And I'll give a testimonial. I think it really helps. I just remember for me, the time that I found your program was in between, I had put in my resignation, but I hadn't left yet. And 2-month program. And it really profoundly changed the way that I showed up in the room, the way that I thought about my work, the way that I realized how much suffering I was creating. Not to say that practice wasn't hard, not to say that there weren't plenty of challenges with the system and all of that, because all of that is true. But the things that I was sort of responsible for, I wasn't aware that I was responsible for. I wasn't aware that I was creating that experience. And I think for me, that was really kind of a lights coming on moment, is how I describe it, of, oh, it turns out I don't have to think these thoughts anymore. I don't have to feel these ways. I can learn to start, feeling differently. I can learn to start having different thoughts and, take care of myself in a different way. And it was just really important work. So for anybody who's out there listening and thinking, that might be good for me, I highly encourage you to check out Karen's program. So
yeah, I think that that's common with coaching in general, right? I'm sure your clients feel this way too, is we think the system is so broken. Why should I have to do anything different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm already doing this much work and you're telling me to do more.
The way I think about it is like, even if the system is like 99% responsible for why we feel bad and 1% comes from how we're thinking about things, we can improve how we feel by 100%. Just from that 1 to 2%, it's going to double. So I think it just, to me, that makes sense. It's like the system is going to be the way it is. There's no way we're going to change it when we're all feeling horrible and bitter and resentful and burnout and tired. And so that's why your podcast is so wonderful, because you're introducing these ideas. It's like, wait, the system can stay the way it is and physicians can feel better. And then maybe we can change the system together from feeling better. Sign me. Like all day. That's what I want.
Yeah, we're here for that. All right. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Karen. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Oh, it's so good to see you. And I can't wait for you to come visit. So
yeah, me too. All right. All right, my friends, that's what we have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoy this episode, I encourage you to check out Karen's website. And of course, you can learn more about my programs as well at www.healthierforgood.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.